Don't clap too soon. Don't peak too early. Okay, thank you very much. And I'd just like to thank Sophie as well for inviting me today and to hopefully share something about human factors with you. Human factors, I could talk all day on. There's so many things to discuss here and so many things to present. But what I'm hopefully going to try and do is highlight how we react in certain stressful situations and hopefully give you some way of coping with some of these things. And particularly relating to some of the talks that we've already had, I think you'll see some of the effects and how we might manage it, how we might deal with our colleagues, and how, not only at the time but afterwards. Human factors plays a big part in that. So where can we actually start? Well, if you look at these guys, this is the fastest sailing yacht in the world, the Hydropter. And this crew are experts in human factors. Their CRM, their team leadership, their communication, they're almost on, an extrasensory level. They don't even have to talk. They'd be very quiet. There's no screaming. There's no shouting. They know what needs to be done. And by doing that, they sail so fast and they have such amazing performance. But human factors become even more important when things go wrong, because lives are now at stake. It's not just about being the fastest yacht, being the first across the line. It's about protecting your crew. It's looking after each other and making sure that you're actually safe. And it's not just in the maritime world that this applies. There's lots and lots of relationship in human factors to the aviation industry, and that's no coincidence, because they are way ahead of medicine and way ahead of the sailing industry and all others, because they've known right back from the 1950s that when things go wrong and they're subsequently analysed, human factors are undoubtedly by far and away the commonest thing involved. And a lot of my colleagues say to me, oh, aviation, we're anaesthetists, we're medical staff, we don't want to know about flying planes. And although I think the analogy can be quite good, they get frustrated and they don't like that. But as you heard, in my world, there is a very close link, because I do aeromedical as well. I do HEMS work. And I had a very interesting experience when I recently joined a new air ambulance. And like normal, you have to do some observer shifts and you have to go through all the selection process and everything else, even if you've done it before. And on my very first shift on the new helicopter, we're flying back to base with no patient when the paramedic opposite suddenly shouts, "I've got smoke coming out the engine." And I'm thinking, whoa, first shift, great. The pilot then goes, "Have you got flames?" He's obviously not impressed by smoke. And she goes, "You can guess what the answer's going to be here." "Yeah, I've got flames." And I'm thinking, oh my God, right, okay, so we're on fire. But we've got 2 engines, so that's not too bad. But immediately things start to kick in. I'm thinking, we're going to crash here. This is really quite serious. So we start this spiral down towards the ground. The pilot puts us into the fastest spiral down and losing height. He's identifying a field where we're hopefully going to land, and he's identified a field where we're going to crash if we don't make the first field, which is really comforting. But there's still no smell of smoke, but I'm thinking, okay, well, at least there's a plan and we're working with it. The next thing is I hear the co-pilot. He activates the halon fire extinguisher, fires the fire extinguisher. Have we got flame? We've still got flame. He fires the second fire extinguisher. We've still got flame. This is obviously quite serious. This is spiraling up. They then go into their challenge checklist. Out comes the checklist. We need to shut an engine down. They're rolling through it. We're just sitting there in awe at these guys. This is so slick. They're going through it, going through everything, shutting one of the engines down. And I've still not got flame, but I'm thinking, and I'm just sitting there thinking, I don't know quite what to do. But then I hear the mayday, and then I hear the communication to the control tower, I hear the communication to the co-pilot, and then we get our briefing. When we crash, didn't like that word. When we crash, this is what we need to do. How we're going to get out the aircraft, take a fire extinguisher if it's safe, try and deal with it. This is all being briefed to us, and I'm so impressed that we're all being briefed, and this is what's going on. And I'm thinking, I don't feel afraid. And that was really a strange thing. I thought, why don't I feel afraid? We're spiraling down towards the ground and all this is going on. And I've certainly tachycardic. I've certainly got some features of anaphylaxis. But don't think it was that at this stage. But I didn't feel fear. And then all of a sudden we level out and the pilot goes, "Great exercise, guys. Let's get some height and let's get back for tea." And I'm thinking... and this is clearly something new to the aircraft. Great briefing. This is something they do on a regular basis. Most days there will be some kind of emergency drill. I'd not been told, which is really comforting. We've had conversations about that since. But I just thought the thing that struck me is, why did I not feel fear? Because I really did think it was real. And what struck me was the air of calm. There was no panic in the aircraft. They were doing everything they had to do. And you think, well, that's because they knew it was a drill. But it's not. Because if you go back and listen to flight data recorders of virtually every aviation crash, and probably the one you're most familiar with is 1549 landing in the Hudson. Sully, if you've not seen the film, you really should. It's a great film. But it's calm. There's no screaming. There's no shouting. Conversations are getting shorter and shorter and shorter. Oh, we're going in the Hudson. There's no big discussion. There's no big debate. But there is calm. And so everybody feels calm. And that's probably the first message when things are starting to go pear-shaped. Keeping that air of calm when things are starting to go wrong. And that's quite a hard thing to do. So how do pilots do it? Well, they spend hours and hours in the simulator. They expose themselves to stress. They inoculate themselves for stress and learn to prepare for that. They also use CRM, crew resource management. It's the way they communicate to minimize errors and to minimize lost messages in transfer. They also do this on a regular basis. And we can learn from this. We can take this away and bring it to our world. And we do lots and lots of training courses, and many of them are pre-hospital. And I've got this fantastic photo of a Swedish consultant. And this is the moment where he first realizes he's got to amputate a leg in a tunnel. And I think we've hit the spot for stress inoculation. The face just says it all. But it gets worse, because it's not just his CRM. The CRM involves the team. So he's now got the whole team. And once they've freed the casualty, they've then got to get out the tunnel, which they then realize is flooding faster than they're leaving. This is true stress inoculation, and whether you're in a tunnel or whether you're in the anaesthetic room, your simulation needs to feel real. It needs to get the heart beating. It needs to get people stressed, because that's how we learn to cope with that stress. Not necessarily in a tunnel, but it could be somewhere else. The other big thing is knowing you've got a problem. Everything's fine. There's no issues. Look at this. And that's one of the big issues. If you're not aware of the situation, you've not got situational awareness, well then we're in one unholy mess. You need to appreciate that things are going wrong. And in anaphylaxis, as we've heard this morning, it can be quite difficult. Many of our patients drop the BP or go a little bit tachycardic for all sorts of reasons. We could all write a whole essay on reasons for moderate hypotension or tachycardia in the middle of your case. And that's why it's often late diagnosed. So we need to be situationally aware, and we need to think about that. So how can we think about that, and how can we improve it? Well, if you go back to Ensley in 1995, Vika Ensley, she was quite an eminent psychologist, and she looked at situational awareness, and she came up with these three things. First thing is perception. You've got to appreciate there is a problem. Then you've got to comprehend the problem and try and put it into a box. And as we were just saying, for us, that can be quite difficult because there's so many potential explanations. And then finally, you've got to project what's going to be the consequence. Do I need to do anything here, or can I just ignore it? Is it not an issue? Is it just the surgeons just stuck a knife in and not told us? So there's lots and lots of things we need to think about. But these are the three elements of situational awareness that she describes. And as we go through this and we think about it a little bit more, the thing for me is my surgeon knows something's wrong because I've got off my chair. We used to read the newspaper, we used to do Sudoku, now you're on the laptop. And he knows that if I've got off the chair and I started doing stuff, something's not right. Because normally we're okay, and it's just coffee, you know, ODA. But yeah, and the second thing is, at what point do you bail out? At what point do you think, stop operating? Can we stop operating? We may have to manage this while he closes the abdomen or stops the bleeding. This could be occurring in the middle of a crisis. At what point do we call for help? At what point do we give the adrenaline, the IV adrenaline? And that is the difficult. Where is the bailout? And that's where a lot of people get into difficulty, because they do things too late. And we say that time and time again. Call for help early. So you went to another case. Now, not quite back to the ether dome, but in my early stages in anaesthesia, I had a very interesting experience like this. I was a little SHO, and I was working with one of the consultants who he was a god in my eyes. He knew everything. He was like a walking textbook. If you wanted to know anything, you went and asked him. And I was on a list with him one morning when he gave a young, fit, healthy lady bolus dose of thiopentone for induction. Okay. Then we suddenly noticed the arm's gone a little bit red, a few wheels coming up, and she's gone a bit tachycardic. And I turned to the consultant, who stood there with a puzzled expression on his head with his comfort blanket. He's just squeezing the bag, the anaesthetic comfort blanket. And he's going, what's going on? And myself with the ODA are now looking at the tachycardia and the blood pressure that's just come up at 50. And the ODA goes, I think she's having an allergic reaction. And I go, yeah, I think she is. The consultant's going, I don't know what's going on. And I think, whoa. And we're just standing there, we're watching this. The next blood pressure comes up at 40. And we're getting really quite concerned now. This little baby SHO thing, I think I know what to do, but I'm too scared to say it. And that's an issue in itself, as we well know, and we'll come on to that later. So what do we do? Well, the ODA, immediately as they do, just almost takes charge. The anaesthetist like this. He's like, squeeze the bag, squeeze the bag. The bag's not helping, but I'll keep squeezing. So he keeps squeezing. The ODA runs next door and brings in another consultant. He's not the walking textbook. He's a bit of a seat of the pants guy. And he just comes in and he looks at the situation. He listens to the ODA, listens to me, looks at the patient and acts. And saves the day. Adrenaline. He saves the day. And the patient's fine and fully recovers. Meanwhile, the other anaesthetist really quite, as we're hearing it, he's just stunned. This patient's not read the book. They've not followed the rules. And at the time, I thought, you know what? I used to really want to be that anaesthetist, but I quite like to be this one now. He's a bit of a cowboy and seems to know what he's doing. So, but that's another story. You need a mix of both, don't you, clearly? But what was being demonstrated there was something that Colonel John Boyd described back in the Korean and Vietnam War with his fighter aces. They have the thing called the OODA loop, where they realized that if you're distracted in any way and you start thinking about all sorts of other things, you'll lose the battle, you'll lose the day, you'll lose the patients. But if you did like the second anaesthetist who came in, the other consultant, he just observed, he orientated what was going on, he made his decision and he acted. No distraction. This was a clear cut in his mind. Maybe he was lucky because he saw it that way and he didn't see the bigger picture and he wasn't distracted by other things, but using the OODA principle, he managed to save the day. So that's a certain process that we can certainly learn from. Let's go to another industry. What about this poor young guy who's driven the digger into the swamp? Why has he done that? What's going on with his situational awareness? Was he not briefed properly? Did he ignore the brief? Is he exhausted? Is he trying to take a shortcut home? Is he just being screamed at by everybody? Has he got so much going on? The alarms are going, the digger's tipping, his boss is on the radio screaming, why have you gone that way? Everything is completely saturating him. He's overwhelmed and he just goes in further. And this is something we talk about. We talk about the ability to, the cognitive offloading, that when you're completely saturated, your bandwidth is overloaded, and one more thing just tips you over the edge, and you leave it there. And saturation of the bandwidth is something that's very, very common when you look at these incidents and accidents. And what we need to try and do is take some load off, give yourself some thinking time. And many of the tools that we use in human factors are all about cognitive offloading and taking off some of the thought process and almost putting you into an automatic process. Because when you're in this saturated bandwidth, you don't hear, you don't see, and you don't communicate. You don't talk to the team. You just la, 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 la. I'm just here. I'm just stuck and I'm lost. And things can start off go badly, but they can rapidly deteriorate and they can rapidly get worse when you're in that sort of situation. You start on the spiral. You spiral into the plug hole. Things are going down. You're in the tunnel. You've got a fixation error, as it's called. You're trying to put that tube in. The Bromley case. You're totally focused. Any other day, you would stop. You'd bail out. You'd go back to a bag of masks. You put an eye gel in. But no, you've got to get this tube in. You're completely focused on a mistake. And you're not hearing anybody. And it's at that point that you need the rest of the team. And that's where the team need to be able to speak up. As I say, like when I was a little SHO, I was afraid to speak up. But we know now we have things like PACE, where any member of the scrub team, any member of the team in ED or wherever else we may be, the ICU, they can raise a concern. They can ask a question. Why is the arm all red? What's this all about? And then they go, have you noticed that this arm's very, I think they might be having an allergic reaction. Still no response. So then they challenge. Are you not going to do anything about the blood pressure and this red arm and the allergic reaction? And then finally, I'm going to go and get help. They go and get somebody to help. They ramp this up. And this is something that everyone should have working in their hospital, in their departments, whether you use PACE or when you use one of the other alternative methods, the ability to ramp things up even when you're not the boss. But being the boss, as we heard earlier on, is a very, very lonely place if you're not supported. When things start to go wrong and you've got the earphones on and you're in the tunnel and you're going down the spiral and you know things are going wrong, you know things are deteriorating, you might know you're losing the patient and there may be 20 people in the room, but no one, you're the one that's going to be in coroner's court. And that's why it's so, so important to get that support and to get that help. And we say this all the time. We say, you know, whenever you do an emergency drill or you do any training on a course, we say, call for help. Everybody says, call for help. Yeah, of course you should call for help. And so you do that.
Bring me everyone.
So when you put that call out, just be careful, because the next thing is, it's like this. And none of them can help. The one person you need, that you've asked to go and get something. So when you ask for help, try and be constructive. Can you get Dr. X from next door? Can you go and get me another consultant? Can you get me the defibrillator? Can you get me? Try and give some specific instructions. Just call for help, especially if you pick the most junior member of the team who's going to be even more rabbit in the headlights than you are. Try and give a clear and concise instruction of what you're actually looking for. Well, you might get this. And at times, though, getting the cavalry arriving is what you really want. And when they arrive, then you might be able to become the team leader. You might not. You might then be able to step out the dark hole, step out the plug hole, and take charge. Because now we can offload ourselves again. We can now be the team leader. We can direct everybody. And whether it's F1 or whether it's even out at a road traffic collision with the fire service, the team leader. Whoops, sorry. Oh, happened there. Sorry. The team leader steps back. Oi. Computer decided to jump. The team leader steps back in the red circle and he oversees things. And the doctor has to be just part of the team. He's not suddenly, I'm the doctor, I'm the expert. He's just part of the team and has to fit in with everybody else. While you're the team leader, there's certain things that we need to be doing. You need to be visualizing and thinking of your plan. And ideally, you can visualize long before. This evening, when you get home, you can think, what would I do if I had an anaphylaxis? You can mentally rehearse. You can mentally prepare these things. The second thing you want to do is share that with the team. It's no good you having the best plan in the world if you don't share it with the team. And you're going to be nervous because things are going badly wrong. You're going to have the gloves of fear. If you've got a tachyo 120, you've got a coarse tremor. Anything more than that, you're not going to be functioning well. You have crazy things like combat breathing. Okay, it's a jargony term, but snipers use it. And they bring their heart rate down beautifully with a few simple things just before you go into the emergency situation. If you're the cavalry coming to help, you've run down the corridor, bring yourself down before you go into the room. And in simple terms, we're going to plan, we're going to communicate, and we're going to stay calm. Calm, remember me on the helicopter? Calm is such an amazing thing if you can maintain that. But so is communication, because we know that communication, every investigation we do, communication has failed. We know that there is a communication issue. So learning to communicate effectively is so important. And if we go to the aviation industry, they've got this nailed on so many levels. At the most basic level, they'll just basically give an instruction. Leader gives an instruction, open communication, and hopefully it happens. If they want to reinforce it, they'll use a checklist. So they give an instruction or ask for something to be done, and they'll get a check back, an acknowledgement back. If they want to reinforce it still further, they'll close the loop and they'll confirm that that check is correct. And that will come simple terms. It might be, can you give a mil of 1 in 10,000 adrenaline IV? And the responder goes, 1 mil of 1 in 10,000 adrenaline, check. And then the responder goes, confirm, 1 mil, 1 in 10,000 adrenaline. And you can even take a step further, will it confirm when it's actually being given? You can see how the level, it starts to get a little bit silly when you're sitting here now. But when you see it done properly, whether it's in aviation or whether you see it in a genuine emergency, these things are really quite important and will really minimize errors. The other thing that we need to do is control the team, control the horde, because there's all these experts now arrived and everybody wants to be the leader and everybody wants to be involved and everybody wants to do something. And if you just go, stop, everybody stop, listen to me, you're likely to get either some sarcastic comment back, usually from the ODA, or everyone's just going to ignore you. And so one of the best words I find is simply focus. Guys, focus. One voice, listen to one person, something as simple as that. It's not intimidating, it's not aggressive. It's just, guys, we need to focus here with one issue. And it suddenly brings the team down a little bit. It's not aggressive, it's not threatening. And it's amazing how much difference that can make to just screaming, everybody stop. And when we talk about involving the team, let's go somewhere else. Let's go to the Battle of Trafalgar and Nelson. How on earth does that link into human factors? Well, this was the traditional way of naval warfare back in the 1800s. The ships would all line up and they'd just shoot hell out of each other. And the biggest ships with the most guns would win, most of the time. So Nelson thought, no, we're not doing that. Trafalgar, we're going to have a different approach. Completely different approach. We're going to sail straight at them in a line. And then when we engage and it causes chaos, as it inevitably will, I want every captain to do their own thing. Just go independent. I'm going to give you autonomy, fire at will, and let's just see what happens. And there was inevitably chaos. And the Spanish Armada really struggled because they couldn't communicate with the flagship. They couldn't see the flagship. And it was utter chaos. Meanwhile, the Red ships, the British ships, just took whatever opportunities they could to just shoot the other ships. And they were outgunned and they were outnumbered and they won the battle. And it was simply because of a simple change in strategy and empowering the team, allowing the team to take some responsibility, trusting your colleagues and giving them that, offloading yourself. Let the team look after this and let the team take control. The next thing we think about is brains are leaky. If you've not seen Flight of the Navigator, it's a great film. I always use the kids as an excuse to watch it, but it's a great film because the computer on the spaceship realizes human brains are leaky. They forget things, and you really do forget things when stuff's going wrong. That's when we really forget things, and that's where we can use quick checklists, acronyms, whatever it may be. And I tried to come up with one for anaphylaxis, and I came with red alert. Let's try that one. So this is a simple way that you could remember. So red, you need to initially, remember you've got to recognize there's a problem. You then got to evaluate the significance of it. Do we need to get off our chair or can we just carry on the computer? And then finally, you need to decide on the options. What are we actually going to do? We then need to act on that. We need to alert the team, share the mental model. We need to carry out some life-saving interventions, adrenaline, fluids, whatever that may be. And then we need to assess the response to that. Have we given enough adrenaline? Have we given enough fluid? Do we need to go back? And so we then recognize if there's been any change and improvements. And then finally, we obviously need to record things. It might not just be for coroner's court, it might be for the investigation, it might just be for your anaesthetic sheet, but we need times and we need a record, or it didn't happen, as we well know. And then finally, once we've gone round this loop a number of times and we've saved the day, we can add an S onto it, red alerts, because we need to stand down. So everybody knows the emergency is over. We've now got some calm. So you can use that, or maybe you just say, I don't like that one at all. Make up your own, but it's a little aid memoir. It's something, a cognitive offloading tool if you want the fancy names. But some of them, this is UCLA's intubation or airway management algorithm. And there's the emergency one there. So Saturn 70, we failed to intubate, it's all going pear-shaped, and the ODA's gone to get this. And that's a really simple one, as you all well know. I used to have a fantastic obstetric failed intubation one, but it was a bit pixelated when it went big. But you've all seen these things on the wall in your room, and I can't imagine any of you ever go to it when the patient's about to die. But that's what you sort of expected to do. But in the real world, if you look at somewhere like NASA, they realize that's ridiculous. You are never going to do it. If somebody leaves the door of the spaceship open, you don't go to the checklist to see what do we do. You know what to do. And that's what boldface is all about. And boldface, if we go to this, we're all over the place here. This is the SR-71 Blackbird, the fastest jet in the world. We've gone from boats to jets now. And if you look at the captain of this thing flies on the edge of space at 3 times the speed of sound. It's quite old now. But this is a quote from one of the captains off the aircraft. He's an astronaut, basically. And he said they had 60 boldface actions for 22 emergencies. 60 things where you don't get the check cards out, you don't go to the flowchart, you just know that when your patient is in VF, they need a shock. It's that sort of thing. There's no check cards, there's no going through it. You just know these things. And we need some of those. We need some of those in our world. Might be adrenaline for anaphylaxis. It's boldface. That's the top secret. That's what we need to actually give. And then we come to the end of this. We've got over the incident. Whether it's been a good outcome or a bad outcome, we need to debrief. There's going to be lessons to learn here. And the aviation industry, they're fantastic. If you switch the engines off mid-Atlantic on your plane by accident, if when you land, you declare it, and as long as you're not on drugs or drunk or something like that, if you declare you made a mistake, you can't be prosecuted. Wow, isn't that amazing? Wouldn't that be great if we all knew that's exactly what was going to happen? And when we're in coroner's court, we're not hoping that things will go well. So that's an incredible system they have in place. But the debrief is so important. One, to bring the team down. The hot debrief initially is so important, and then the subsequent debrief for lessons learned. But one of the other important things of the debrief is the PTSD that we heard earlier, the management problems. And we didn't write this talk together. But one of the biggest things that I see is people you get imposter syndrome. You get young docs who think, I'm never going to be any good enough for this. I'm never going to be good enough to be a consultant. And then you get consultants thinking, have I lost it? Am I no longer good enough? This whole thing, and unless the team supports them, because we all know it could be any one of us. It could be any one of us that gave that penicillin and missed the allergic thing. You know, in the real world, you know, we're not perfect. We make mistakes. So the team needs to be there to support you. And that's my final message, really. Be nice. Look after each other. It's a huge part of human factors. And it was so nice to hear this morning that the team rallied around Dr. Coley there and they supported him and they gave him that support that he needed. But he still felt exposed and he still felt vulnerable. And you will. And think about that when it's your colleagues. You go, yeah, I'm fine. They're probably not. So support them and be nice. Thank you.